The bond between a parent and child is meant to be one of unwavering love, unbreakable protection, and absolute trust. From the moment a child is born, a parent becomes their guardian, their first source of comfort, and the one who stands beside them through every challenge in life. A parent's love is expected to be unconditional, guiding their child through the uncertainties of the world with patience, care, and devotion. A father, in particular, is often seen as a shield, a fortress of strength, a guiding hand, and the one who ensures that no harm ever befalls his children. He is expected to sacrifice, protect, and nurture, creating a safe space where his children can grow without fear. A father is meant to be the protector, not the predator. He is supposed to be the one who fights against danger, not the very source of it. Children look up to their parents as heroes, trusting them blindly, believing they will always be there to catch them when they fall. But what happens when that trust is shattered? What happens when the very person a child depends on turns against them? When the hands meant to comfort and support become the hands that inflict pain? It is a betrayal deeper than words can describe. The destruction of not just the body, but the spirit. A child who grows up fearing the very presence of their own parent experiences a nightmare from which they cannot wake up. The home, which should be a sanctuary, becomes a prison, a place where every step, every word, and every action is monitored. There is no escape, no moment of true peace, only the constant looming fear of what might come next. At first, it may begin with subtle control, dictating what to wear, what to say, who to speak to. Then, it becomes more suffocating, spying, interrogating, punishing. The victim is stripped of their voice, forced into submission under the weight of fear and violence. And when control is no longer enough, when defiance threatens the illusion of power, the predator takes the final, most horrific step, erasing the life they once claimed to love. But why? Why does a father, the one meant to shield his children from harm, become their executioner? What twisted sense of power, control, or twisted ideology drives a man to believe that murder is the only answer? How does love turn into possession and possession into destruction? It is in these questions that we find the haunting case of Amina and Sarah Said, two bright, beautiful sisters who knew the monster that lived under their roof but could do nothing to escape him. Two girls who saw the warning signs, who cried out for help, who tried to run, but in the end were caught in a trap they could not escape. Their father, Yaser Said, the man who was supposed to love them the most, became the one who silenced them forever. But why? What drove Yaser to commit such an unspeakable crime? What did his daughters do that sealed their fate? This is not just a story of murder. It is a story of fear, control, and betrayal. A story of two young girls who saw their deaths coming, but were powerless to stop it. What really happened to Amina and Sarah Said? Stay with us as we uncover the dark truth behind this horrifying case. Welcome to the Crime Series. I am glad to have you join us on another video. Kindly subscribe, like, and share. Let me know where you are watching from. Yaser Said was born on January 27, 1957, in the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt, a region known for its harsh desert landscapes, tribal influences, and strategic significance in Middle Eastern geopolitics. Growing up in a deeply traditional and patriarchal society, Yaser was shaped by conservative values that placed family honor, male authority, and rigid gender roles at the core of social expectations. These principles were deeply ingrained in him from childhood, forming the foundation of his future beliefs and actions. From an early age, Yaser was taught that a man's honor was tied to the behavior of the women in his family. In many conservative communities, a woman's independence was seen as a potential threat to the family's reputation. Strict obedience, submission, and purity were emphasized, especially for daughters, who were expected to uphold their family's honor through their actions, dress, and associations. Any deviation from these norms was often met with severe punishment or even social ostracization. As Yaser grew into adulthood, these beliefs became firmly cemented in his psyche. He viewed obedience as a necessity, not just for his future wife, but for his children, especially his daughters. Love and compassion were secondary, control was paramount. He believed that his authority should never be questioned, and this mindset would dictate the course of his family life in the years to come. In 1983, at the age of 26, Yaser immigrated to the United States on a student visa in search of better opportunities. However, details about his education or any formal academic pursuits remain unclear. There is little to no evidence suggesting that he actually attended school or worked toward a degree. Instead, he quickly integrated into working-class immigrant communities, taking up various jobs before settling into a career as a taxi driver. The move to America marked the beginning of a new chapter. Yet Yaser carried with him the deeply ingrained cultural values and traditions of his homeland. Unlike many immigrants who adapt and evolve to fit into a different society, Yaser resisted change. Instead of embracing Western ideals of individual freedom, equality, and women's rights, he clung tightly to his old-world beliefs. He continued to see himself as the sole authority figure in his family, the enforcer of discipline, and the keeper of honor. By 1987, at the age of 30, Yaser married Patricia Tissy Owens, a 15-year-old girl from Texas. The stark age gap of 15 years was unsettling, raising serious ethical and legal questions about the nature of their union. However, at the time, there was little intervention from authorities, and the marriage proceeded with little resistance from Patricia's family. From the beginning, their relationship was built on an imbalance of power. Yaser, an older and dominant man, assumed complete control over Patricia's life. Patricia had no real independence, and any resistance she showed was met with intimidation and punishment. The lack of intervention at this stage of Yaser's life allowed his controlling and abusive tendencies to grow unchecked. He dictated how Patricia dressed, who she spoke to, and where she could go. Over time, she became completely dependent on him, a pattern that would later be repeated with their children, especially Amina and Sarah. The couple started their family, and in no time they had 3 children. Yaser Said, their firstborn and only son. Amina Said, their eldest daughter, known for her intelligence and strong-willed nature. Sarah Said, their youngest daughter, kind-hearted and deeply attached to her sister. Yaser also had a daughter from a previous relationship, though little is known about her. It is unclear whether he maintained any relationship with her or provided support. As a father, Yaser did not nurture or protect. He dictated and controlled. His approach to parenting was authoritarian, leaving no room for disobedience. He was not just a strict father, he was a ruler within his home. He monitored every aspect of his children's lives. He restricted their social interactions, especially with boys. He controlled their clothing choices, ensuring they adhered to his conservative beliefs. He spied on them, sometimes recording their conversations without their knowledge. He punished them severely for any behavior he deemed inappropriate. Yaser worked as a taxi driver, a job that provided him with a flexible schedule and financial independence. However, it also allowed him to keep a close watch on his family. Unlike a traditional 9-to-5 job, his work hours were unpredictable, which meant that his children never knew when he would be home or when he would suddenly appear. This kept them in a constant state of anxiety. Though his earnings were modest, his job suited his desire to monitor his household. Control was more important to Yaser than financial success. His authority over his family meant everything to him. Amina, his first daughter, was born in 1989 in Texas. From a young age, Amina showed exceptional intelligence and strong-willed independence, traits that set her apart from her peers. Amina excelled academically, consistently earning high grades and expressing a deep interest in subjects like literature and history. Her teachers and classmates often spoke of her kindness, charisma, and determination. She was not only book-smart, but also socially adept, forming meaningful friendships despite the restrictions placed on her at home. Outside of school, Amina participated in extracurricular activities with a particular passion for taekwondo. The martial art gave her a sense of discipline and strength, both physically and mentally. It was during these classes that she met Joseph Moreno, a fellow student, and the two formed an immediate connection. Their relationship blossomed into something more than friendship, but Amina knew she had to keep it a secret. Amina's father, Yaser, had strict rules for his daughters, forbidding them from engaging in romantic relationships, especially with non-Muslims. He viewed dating as a disgrace to the family, reinforcing his belief that his daughters should marry only men he approved of, preferably through arranged marriages. Despite this, Amina and Joseph continued seeing each other in absolute secrecy. They communicated through hidden notes and covert messages, never using their phones for fear that Yaser might check their calls or text messages. Amina even had a code word that she shared with Joseph. If she ever sent it, it meant she was in danger and that he should stop all contact immediately. Her fears were not unfounded. Yaser had a habit of spying on his daughters, sometimes using hidden video and audio recordings to monitor their activities. He frequently searched their belongings, looking for any sign of disobedience. Amina knew that if her father discovered the relationship, the consequences would be severe. As time passed, Yaser's suspicions grew. He became increasingly paranoid about Amina's whereabouts and friendships, often accusing her of dishonoring the family. He questioned her repeatedly, sometimes resorting to physical violence in an attempt to break her into confessing. Amina confided in friends and teachers, sharing her deep fear of her father's control and rage. She admitted that she wanted to escape, to leave her home, run away with Joseph, and start a new life where she could make her own choices. Her mother, Patricia, was aware of Amina's struggles, but often wavered in her support. At times, she encouraged Amina to stay and obey her father, fearing retaliation. Other times, she seemed to understand the danger her daughters were in. However, her inconsistent stance left Amina feeling trapped and unsupported. As Amina planned her escape with Joseph, she knew she was running out of time. The closer she got to freedom, the more intense her father's surveillance and threats became. She had already witnessed his violent nature and knew that if he ever caught her in a lie, the consequences could be deadly. Despite the overwhelming fear, Amina refused to let go of her hope for a better future. A future where she could love freely, pursue her dreams, and live without fear of her father's control. But that future would never come. Amina's younger sister, Yaser Said, was born in 1990, the youngest of the 3 children. While she was only a year younger than her sister Amina, their bond was inseparable, with Sarah often looking up to Amina for guidance and emotional support. Unlike her more outspoken and rebellious sister, Sarah was described as kind-hearted, quiet, and diligent, always striving to do well in school and make her family proud. However, like Amina, she faced the same harsh restrictions and oppressive control imposed by their father. As Sarah entered her teenage years, Yaser's grip on her life tightened. He dictated what she could wear, who she could speak to, and where she could go. Any form of independence was seen as a threat to his authority, and Sarah, despite her soft-spoken nature, began to feel suffocated under his rules. She was not allowed to participate in social activities like her peers and was expected to obey without question. In an attempt to gain a small measure of independence, Sarah took a part-time job at a convenience store after school. This was a rare opportunity for her to interact with the outside world beyond her home and school. However, even this was closely monitored by Yaser. He would often park outside the store, watching her every move. If he felt she was too friendly or smiled too much at customers, he would reprimand her harshly. To Yaser, even the smallest act of normal teenage behavior was seen as a betrayal of his strict expectations. Sarah, like Amina, suffered from physical and emotional abuse at home. Yaser did not hesitate to use violence as a means of control, and both sisters lived in constant fear of his temper and unpredictable outbursts. While Sarah rarely spoke openly about the abuse, she confided in close friends about the reality of her home life. She would express her desire for freedom, dreaming of a life where she could make her own choices without fear. However, she was also aware that leaving was dangerous. She had seen how Yaser reacted when he suspected Amina of having a secret relationship, and she feared that any attempt at rebellion would be met with severe consequences. Despite the fear that loomed over her, Sarah continued to hold on to hope. She loved her sister deeply, and their bond was one of the few sources of comfort she had. The two often spoke about escaping and building a life where they could be free from their father's control. Yet Sarah also struggled with loyalty to her mother, who, despite knowing about the abuse, remained tied to Yaser. This emotional conflict weighed heavily on Sarah, making her feel trapped between her desire for freedom and the reality of her situation. As tensions in the household escalated, Sarah found herself increasingly fearful of what her father might do. She sensed that Yaser was becoming more paranoid and controlling, and she knew that their time to escape was running out. While she tried to remain hopeful, the oppressive environment at home made it difficult to see a way out. However, Said's case was totally different, the eldest child of Yaser Said and Patricia T.C. Owens. Unlike his sisters, who were closely monitored, abused, and controlled, Islam was treated differently by their father. In traditional patriarchal households, especially those with deeply conservative values, sons are often given more freedom and power than daughters. This was very evident in the Said household, where Islam was not subjected to the same harsh treatment as his sisters. As Amina and Sarah grew older and started resisting their father's control, Islam remained loyal to Yaser. He seemed to believe in his father's authority and belief system. By late December 2007, the tension inside the Said household had reached a breaking point. Amina and Sarah had lived under their father's strict, oppressive control for years, but recent events had made their situation unbearable. Yaser had discovered that Amina was in a relationship with Joseph Moreno, a young man she had met through taekwondo classes, and his rage was escalating. Both daughters feared for their lives, knowing that their father had made threats before and had a history of physical abuse. Patricia, their mother, was well aware of the danger her daughters were in. Over the years, she had witnessed Yaser's violent outbursts, controlling behavior, and obsessive surveillance over Amina and Sarah. He monitored their phone calls, followed them, and even videotaped them at work and school. His fury over Amina's relationship in particular signaled that something worse was coming. In an uncharacteristic act of defiance, Patricia decided to take action. She packed their things, gathered her daughters, and fled their home in Louisville, Texas, heading toward Tulsa, Oklahoma, where they sought refuge with Joseph Moreno's relatives. For the first time in years, Amina and Sarah felt a sense of relief. Away from Yaser's watchful eyes, they imagined a future where they could live without fear. Amina had even discussed plans of marrying Joseph and starting a new life, free from her father's influence. Sarah, while less vocal, also shared her sister's desire for independence. The two girls felt safe in Tulsa, believing that they had finally escaped Yaser's grip. However, their safety was short-lived. Yaser quickly discovered that they had run away. He repeatedly called Patricia, leaving voicemails and sending messages, demanding that she return home with the girls. At first, Patricia resisted. She had seen Yaser's fury firsthand and knew that he was capable of serious harm. But his tone began to change. Instead of threats, he began to plead. Yaser insisted that he had changed. He claimed that he forgave the girls and that he simply wanted his family back together. He assured Patricia that no harm would come to them, that he was willing to move forward if they would just come home. He was persistent, calling multiple times a day, and even had other relatives call to pressure Patricia. Amina saw through the deception. She begged her mother not to go back, knowing that Yaser would never truly forgive them. She refused to return home, sensing that Yaser's calm tone was a trap. But Sarah was conflicted. She trusted her mother's judgment and believed that perhaps their father would not harm them if Patricia was there to mediate. Eventually, Patricia made a fateful decision. She told her daughters that they had to return to Texas. Amina was devastated. She refused to go, pleading with her mother to stay in Tulsa where they were safe. But Patricia insisted, claiming that Yaser was sincere in his apologies and that things would be different. Amina did not believe her. Desperate, Amina sought refuge at a friend's house, refusing to leave. She knew that going back would seal her fate. But Patricia was relentless. She drove to Amina's friend's house and demanded that she come with them. An argument broke out, with Amina begging her mother to listen. But Patricia, convinced by Yaser's promises, would not take no for an answer. "Amina," she told her daughter, "your father has forgiven you. He wants us to come home. We need to go back." Amina had no choice. She was forced to return with her mother and sister. By December 31st, 2007, the Said family was back in Texas. Amina texted Joseph Moreno, telling him she loved him and that she didn't think she would make it out alive. If you found this story compelling and appreciate the way we bring real-life cases to you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Your support helps us continue to uncover the truth and share these important stories. Like, share, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going. On January 1st, 2008, a day after returning from Tulsa, Oklahoma, where they had briefly escaped their father's control, the two sisters were unknowingly walking into a trap. Their father, Yaser Said, had made up his mind. His daughters had dishonored him, and they would pay the ultimate price. That evening, he played the role of a father seeking reconciliation. He approached his wife, Patricia, and told her that he wanted to take Amina and Sarah out for dinner, just the three of them. He claimed he needed to talk to them privately, clear misunderstandings, and work toward peace. Patricia, despite knowing the rage and violence her husband was capable of, did not resist. At first, she suggested joining them, but Yaser quickly shut the idea down. He insisted that this was between him and his daughters. Whether she believed him or simply feared the consequences of defying him remains uncertain. What is certain is that she let them go. Trusting their mother's assurance that their father had forgiven them, Amina and Sarah hesitantly climbed into the back seat of his taxi. Yaser started driving, but he wasn't heading toward any restaurant. Instead, he navigated through the streets of Irving, Texas, taking roads that led farther away from crowded areas. The lively streets faded behind them, replaced by dark, isolated roads. The sisters sat in uneasy silence, their instincts likely telling them something was wrong. Then, at some point during the ride, Yaser made his move. With no remorse, no hesitation, Yaser pulled out a gun. The enclosed space of the taxicab became a slaughterhouse as he opened fire on his own daughters. Amina, the eldest, was shot twice. Her death was likely instant, a cruel mercy compared to what her younger sister endured. Sarah, the youngest, was shot 9 times. 9. But even after the repeated gunfire, she was still alive. Bleeding out, barely able to move, Sarah did the only thing she could. She reached for her phone. At 7:33 p.m., Sarah managed to dial 911. Her voice was weak, but her words were clear and filled with terror. "Help, my dad shot me. I'm dying, I'm dying." The dispatcher, trying to get more information, kept the line open, but Sarah's voice faded. The pain, the blood loss, the trauma, it was all too much. The line eventually went silent. That call was the defining piece of evidence in the case. It was Sarah's final act of defiance. Even as she lay there, moments from death, she made sure the world would know who had done this to her. Yaser did not check if Sarah was still breathing. He did not show any remorse, did not call for help. Instead, he drove to the service entrance of the Omni Mandalay Hotel, now the Omni Las Colinas Hotel, in Irving, Texas. There, he abandoned the taxi with his daughters' lifeless bodies still inside. By the time police arrived at the crime scene, Yaser was already long gone. The sight inside the taxi was gruesome. 2 young girls, dressed for what they thought was a dinner, now covered in blood, lifeless in the back seat of their father's cab. Yaser vanished without a trace, triggering a nationwide manhunt that would last for 12 years. His disappearance baffled authorities. The sheer brutality of the crime sent shockwaves through the local community and beyond. As news of the honor killings spread, public outrage grew. The tragic story of Amina and Sarah was widely covered in national and international media, with many questioning how such an event could unfold in modern-day America. In the days following the murders, vigils were held across Texas in memory of Amina and Sarah. Friends, classmates, and teachers spoke out about the girls' bright futures and the fear they had lived under. They recalled how Amina had been an ambitious student who dreamed of a career in medicine, while Sarah had been kind-hearted and hard-working, always trying to maintain peace despite their father's oppressive nature. Law enforcement agencies, including the Irving Police Department, the FBI, and the U.S. Marshals Service, launched a massive search operation to track down Yaser. Initially, many believed he had fled to Egypt, his country of origin, as he had often spoken about wanting to return. However, investigators found no official record of his departure, suggesting that he had likely remained in the United States, aided by those willing to shelter him. With no immediate leads and Yaser effectively disappearing off the grid, the case soon turned cold. However, authorities and the public remained committed to seeking justice for Amina and Sarah, vowing that Yaser would not escape accountability forever. For 12 years, Yaser Said managed to evade capture, becoming one of the most sought-after fugitives in the United States. Over the years, multiple unconfirmed sightings of Yaser emerged across various U.S. cities, particularly in states with large immigrant communities. The New York City and Newark, New Jersey metropolitan areas were frequently mentioned in reports, with some witnesses claiming to have seen a man resembling Yaser working as a cab driver. This theory gained traction due to Yaser's past profession, as it was an occupation that allowed for anonymity and easy movement between locations. Despite these leads, none of the sightings led to his capture. Each time law enforcement attempted to follow up, Yaser had either already moved on or the information turned out to be unreliable. The frustration grew as it became clear that Yaser had help from others, making him exceptionally difficult to track. As years passed with no successful arrest, the case gained national attention. In December 2014, the FBI placed Yaser on its 10 most wanted fugitives list, significantly increasing the pressure on him and those aiding his escape. A $100,000 reward was offered for information leading to his arrest, further incentivizing the public to report any possible sightings. During his fugitive years, Yaser displayed a remarkable ability to avoid detection. Unlike many fugitives who attempt to create false identities or flee to distant countries, Yaser seemed to have stayed within familiar territories, relying on trusted individuals for protection. His ability to sustain a low profile for over a decade suggests that he rarely, if ever, interacted with strangers or engaged in activities that would require official documentation. The lack of a digital footprint was another challenge for investigators. Yaser never used bank accounts, credit cards, or registered phone numbers, making traditional tracking methods ineffective. It wasn't until 2017 that law enforcement received a credible breakthrough in the case. A maintenance worker at an apartment complex in Bedford, Texas, where Yaser's son, Yaser Said, lived, reported seeing a man resembling Yaser inside the unit. Recognizing the importance of the lead, authorities quickly obtained a search warrant and launched an operation to investigate the apartment. Upon entering, officers found several personal items that strongly indicated Yaser had recently been there. These included cigarettes, toiletries, and a toothbrush, all items that suggested someone was living in the unit beyond just Yaser Said. More tellingly, the apartment contained a sliding glass door leading to a small balcony with a damaged shrub just below, hinting that someone may have fled in haste. Forensic investigators collected the discarded cigarette butts and toothbrush, later sending them to the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia, for DNA analysis. When tested, the DNA matched that of Amina and Sarah Said's biological father, a confirmation that Yaser had indeed been inside the apartment. This discovery marked the most concrete evidence of Yaser's whereabouts since his disappearance in 2008. However, despite the significant breakthrough, Yaser had once again managed to slip through the cracks. When authorities arrived, he was nowhere to be found, suggesting that he had either been tipped off or noticed the heightened police presence and fled before officers could apprehend him. Surveillance footage from the complex was inconclusive, and investigators were left with more questions than answers. After 12 years on the run, Yaser Said's life as a fugitive came to an end in August 2020, when federal authorities tracked him down in Justin, Texas, a small town located north of Fort Worth. His capture was the result of an extensive and methodical investigation led by the FBI's Violent Crimes Task Force, along with local law enforcement agencies. The house he was caught belonged to a relative, and investigators noticed suspicious activity. Yaser and Yaser Said were seen entering and exiting the house regularly. A third, unidentified male, was occasionally spotted inside when the others were not present. The home appeared to have unusual security precautions, including limited movement of its occupants and an apparent effort to avoid detection. Yaser was immediately transferred into federal custody before being moved to the Dallas County Jail, where he awaited trial. His arrest brought closure to law enforcement officials who had been tracking him for over a decade, and relief to those who had fought tirelessly for justice for Amina and Sarah Said. After nearly 2 years in custody, jury selection for Said's trial began in early August 2022. On August 2, 2022, opening statements were delivered in the Dallas County District Court. Said, now in his mid-60s, appeared in court with a translator, speaking through an Arabic interpreter throughout the proceedings. From the outset, Said maintained his innocence, claiming that he was not present when his daughters were murdered. His defense relied on the argument that he had taken his daughters for a drive in his taxi but had left them alone after noticing an unspecified threat following them. According to Said's version of events, he abandoned the cab, leaving Amina and Sarah alive, and suggested that someone else must have killed them. This claim was swiftly dismantled by the prosecution. They presented overwhelming evidence that tied Yaser Said directly to the murders, making it clear that he had lured his daughters into his taxi under false pretenses, a final act of deception before executing them. The prosecution's case rested on a combination of forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and digital records, all pointing to Yaser Said as the sole perpetrator. The most damning pieces of evidence included Sarah Said's 911 call. In a harrowing recording, Sarah identified her father as the shooter, pleading for help before succumbing to her injuries. Forensic evidence. Autopsy reports confirmed that both girls had been shot multiple times, with Amina suffering 2 gunshot wounds and Sarah enduring 9. The close-range nature of the gunshot wounds indicated an execution-style killing, ruling out Said's claim that he had fled before the attack. Surveillance and witness accounts. Hotel security footage near the Omni Mandalay Hotel in Irving, Texas, where the taxi and bodies were discovered, helped establish a timeline of Said's movements. Testimonies from law enforcement, forensic experts, and former acquaintances further contradicted his defense. Prosecutors highlighted years of domestic abuse, control, and threats Said had directed at his daughters, demonstrating a clear motive for the crime. Emails, text messages, and witness statements revealed that both Amina and Sarah feared for their lives, with Amina even writing that her father would, without any drama, kill us. Throughout the trial, Yaser Said showed no remorse. He denied responsibility, insisting that he had loved his daughters and had no reason to harm them. His defense team argued that he had been unfairly portrayed and that the case lacked direct physical evidence, placing the gun in his hand at the moment of the shooting. However, the sheer weight of the prosecution's evidence, combined with the historical abuse and the recorded 911 call, left little room for doubt. After hearing closing arguments, the jury deliberated for only 3 hours before reaching a unanimous verdict. On August 9, 2022, Yaser Said was found guilty of capital murder. His sentencing was immediate. He was given life in prison without the possibility of parole. Since Texas law requires a minimum of 17 years on death row before an execution, and given Said's age and circumstances, prosecutors opted not to pursue the death penalty. The judge, Chika Anyam, addressed Said directly, condemning his actions as a senseless and brutal crime against his own daughters. For Amina and Sarah's surviving family members and friends, the verdict provided a long-awaited sense of justice, even though no punishment could ever undo the tragedy. As of 2024, Yaser Said is serving his life sentence at the McConnell Unit, a maximum security prison in Beeville, Texas. He will never be eligible for parole and remains isolated from the outside world. For many, the trial of Yaser Said marked the end of a 12-year fight for justice, ensuring that Amina and Sarah's voices were finally heard, even in death. While Yaser Said was the primary perpetrator of the murders of Amina and Sarah Said, he was not alone in his efforts to evade justice. After Yaser went on the run in 2008, his son Islam took on the role of a protector, ensuring that his father remained hidden from law enforcement. Court documents revealed that Islam acted as a go-between, facilitating communication between Yaser and other family members who were aiding his escape. He provided financial support, ensuring Yaser had enough money, food, and basic necessities. He helped secure different hiding places, moving Yaser between locations in Texas to avoid detection. He deliberately misled authorities, pretending that he had no idea where his father was. Law enforcement gathered substantial evidence linking Islam to the harboring of his father, including phone records showing that Islam had been in frequent contact with his father despite publicly claiming he had no idea where he was. Financial transactions indicating that Islam had sent money and resources to help his father stay hidden. Testimony from FBI agents who observed Islam and his uncle Yaser making frequent trips to locations where Yaser was later found. Facing overwhelming evidence, Islam pleaded guilty on January 19, 2021, to the following charges: harboring a fugitive and conspiracy to obstruct justice. On April 27, 2021, he was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Despite the guilty plea, Islam never expressed remorse for his actions. As of 2024, Islam is serving his sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution in Big Spring, Texas. Another very key name in this case is Yaser Abdul Fattah Said. Yaser is Yaser's older brother, making him Amina and Sarah's uncle. At the time of his arrest in August 2020, he was 59 years old and living in Euless, Texas. Following his arrest, Yaser initially denied everything. However, prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence, proving his deliberate efforts to keep Yaser hidden. On February 4, 2021, a federal jury found Yaser guilty of conspiracy to harbor a fugitive and harboring a fugitive. On June 4, 2021, he was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. However, unlike Islam, Yaser attempted to distance himself from the case by claiming that he did not agree with Yaser's actions and that he had only helped him because of family loyalty. However, prosecutors argued that he knew exactly what he was doing and deliberately obstructed justice. As of 2024, Yaser is serving his sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution in Bastrop, Texas. Despite their tragic deaths, Amina and Sarah Said's voices live on, their story becoming a symbol of resistance against honor-based violence and domestic abuse. What happened to them was not just another crime. It was a terrifying reality that many young women still face around the world today. Their murders ignited a global conversation about the dangers of controlling households, forced obedience, and the consequences of cultural expectations that prioritize honor over human life. Their story has been told, retold, and examined across multiple platforms, ensuring that their voices would never be forgotten. Their deaths sparked nationwide and global discussions about honor killings in Western countries. Many assumed that honor-based killings only happened in Middle Eastern and South Asian countries. However, Amina and Sarah's case proved otherwise. It shed light on the fact that patriarchal control, extreme ideology, and cultural violence can exist anywhere, even in the United States.